Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Designing for Impact, Building Hubs and Corridors in the Complete Community. We're happy you're able to join us to help transcend the woke wave and create real lasting change. I first want to say thank you to the AIA Houston 2020 Visions, and the Jedi subcommittees for your partnership in this process. We would like to also say thank you to NOMA and the Architecture Center Houston for their partnership in this as well. We worked for months to bring this presentation to you, and I want to say thank you to the steering committee, who consisted of Jennifer Ward, Catherine Calloway, Tina McNoe, Catherine Ruiz, Janice Brackett, Gregory Benjamin, Krista Stoneham, Sarah Imram, and Jasmine Jones. This whole process came about. Krista Stoneham and my friend and colleague in the Mayor's Office of Complete Communities had a brainstorming session, and we were trying to figure out ways that we could really impact our complete communities and bring about change through design. Around that same time, Catherine Ruiz approached me asking if there was any way that the AIA and NOMA and other groups who had similar interests could do anything in the complete communities to bring about a real impactful change. And then this idea was born. So we would like to thank you all for joining us tonight. We hope you all learn great insight into community-led design strategies, and we hope that you sign up for our Design Community Charrette workshops that will happen February 20th. Please sign up by this Friday. Throughout tonight's webinar, there will be a Q&A box. Please feel free to drop questions in at any time throughout the night to ask questions to the panelists or any of those making presentations. We will answer them as we can throughout the night. We will also answer a few of them live at the end of our webinar. Anything that we don't get to answering tonight, we will definitely make sure we send via text, follow up on an email, and responses to all of your questions. Again, thank you for joining us. We're going to give a few minutes and let everybody log on. We had an overwhelming response that we're really proud of. I am now to introduce Catherine Ruiz, who will speak to you on behalf of the AIA.
Thank you, Lindsay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Catherine Ruiz. I'm a 2021 chair for the AIA Houston Committee on the Environment, and we are proud to have been one of the founding groups for the AIA Houston Jedi Collective. For those that are unfamiliar, the Houston Jedi Collective, which stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusivity, was assembled by AIA and NOMA members in the summer of 2020 and has taken as its mission to dismantle the barriers that have inhibited the growth of our profession and our community. Now, I'd like to speak a little bit about the mission statement. When we look at our design profession as a whole, similar to many professions, we see disproportionate demographics, one of them being that minorities and women are less likely to hold leadership positions or receive equal pay. This is a major issue that the Houston Jedi Collective, along with the many emerging EDI groups and other chapters in the nation, is determined to bring to the forefront. And we are dedicated to driving a change in culture amongst our local practitioners. Today's discussion, however, is going to touch on the second half of that mission statement, the community. As design professionals who have the ability to significantly shape and impact neighborhoods through the built environment, we cannot fight for justice, equity, diversity, and inclusivity within our own profession, while ignoring how our professional services and projects impact the lives of the surrounding community members. Minority and low-income communities frequently bear the brunt of the impacts of unhealthy, energy inefficient, and disaster-vulnerable buildings. These communities have a history of displacement, and our current day design priority focuses on a small number of clients over the surrounding neighborhood stakeholders. This needs to change, and today's discussion will focus on how we as design professionals can utilize our design skills towards the benefit of our local community. We at the Jedi Collective and the Houston COPE Committee are very excited to be supporting Complete Communities today. If anyone is interested in joining the AIA Jedi Collective, please reach out at either the address on the slide or the AIA Houston office, and everyone is welcome to join us on the first Wednesday of the month at noon for our monthly meeting. I'll now pass it over to the 2021 AIA Houston NOMA President, Justin Taplett.
Well, thank you so much for that, Catherine. And on behalf of Houston NOMA, I also extend my thank yous to all of you all joining this conversation tonight. And as Catherine mentioned, my name is Justin Taplett. I work currently as an architect with the Houston office of the design firm called Gensler, for those not aware. And I also am the 2021 and 22 Houston NOMA chapter president. And so, when we're talking about paradigm shifts, about how we create our built environment, it's really not an easy conversation, and it's difficult, no small task. But I truly remain optimistic, sitting here because of the engagement, all of the registrants, all of you all that have decided to invest yourself in this conversation and to see change. And so I believe, through tonight's event, you'll leave not only inspired and encouraged, but I think more importantly, you'll feel a bit more empowered to really see where you fit in the conversation, to leave your mark on Houston. And so I'm just going to take one more minute to give an overview, a little bit about Houston NOMA, who we are, and why we've linked arms with our partners here, Houston AIA and the Mayor's Office for Complete Communities to bring you this program. And so zooming out, the big picture, the National Organization of Minority Architects, simply referred to as NOMA, we specifically exist to foster justice and equity in our communities of color through the US. So with about 32 professional chapters nationwide, we do this through a couple ways: outreach, community advocacy, professional development, as well as design excellence, promoting that. So specifically speaking of our Houston chapter for 2021, we are laser focused this year on advocating, building, and connecting, as you see on the slide in front of you. And we don't have time to go into all the details of what that looks like for our chapter, but I'll point out that it happens on a variety of scales, all the way from the individual member up to the neighborhood and the city level that we're talking about tonight. And so, as you can see and have heard so far from Catherine, our goals and objectives are directly aligned, and so with as well as with Complete Communities on this event tonight. And so I'm sure you all can agree with me, and I think it's evident by the nature of your attendance tonight that this work and this conversation has never been more important than now. And so lastly, I could go on and on about what we're doing, but as you see on the slide, please feel free to give us a follow on any social media channels or shoot an email if you would like to continue the conversation. I'd be more than happy to hear from you. And with that, I will pass it over to Ms. Shannon Buggs, the Director of Complete Communities. Thank you all.
Thank you, Justin. Good evening, everyone. I am Shannon Buggs, and I am the Director of the Mayor's Office of Complete Communities here at the City of Houston. And I wish you all a happy Black History Month. It is a notable and very wonderful thing that we are launching these design charrette workshops in support of Mayor Sylvester Turner's signature initiative, Complete Communities, at the start of our nation's annual month-long celebration of achievements by Black people and the many ways that they have made and shaped U.S. history. When Carter G. Woodson started this annual celebration as a week of Negro History Week 95 years ago, it was at a time when a lot of people in this country did not remember or recognize the African-American presence in history. In fact, it was worse than that. It was that Black people were deliberately left out of the telling of the stories about what makes the United States of America a truly great nation. And Dr. Woodson was determined that Black people would no longer be ignored or erased from history books. Next slide. Similarly, when Mayor Turner was inaugurated, if you go to the next slide, thank you. As Houston's 62nd mayor in January of 2016, he vowed to see the overlooked and to listen to the ignored. Well, you can go back to this, we'll be fine. At the time when Mayor Turner was inaugurated, he said he did not want to be the mayor of two cities, one for those who have and one for those who have not. And then in April of 2017, he launched the Complete Communities Initiative to address the inequities that divide our city on socioeconomic fault lines. Next slide. The Complete Communities Initiative moves Houston forward on expanding opportunity and rectifying injustices. And I'm so pleased that tonight we're here with the AIA and NOMA, and that we're specifically talking about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and how community-led design fits into all of that effort. One reason that we're doing this work in the Complete Communities is because every neighborhood in Houston should have an identity and a voice in its development. And so towards that end, we built an inclusive and responsive community planning process to elevate the voices of residents who have been ignored for too long. Next slide. Historically, too many minority and low to moderate income Houston neighborhoods have not fully benefited from the innovation, individual prosperity, and economic growth that built Houston's reputation as the world's energy capital. The Complete Communities mission is to address those historic inequities that make economically distressed communities, those historic inequities in economically distressed communities, so that all Houston residents and business owners can access quality services and amenities close to where they live and work. The Complete Communities vision is to break down silos and eliminate systemic opportunity barriers in those neighborhoods where chronic stresses inhibit financial stability, educational attainment, and physical and mental well-being. Next slide. The initiative's public-private partnerships help to realize residents' aspirations for their neighborhoods and personal lives. And by having a signature capital project in every Complete Community, we will be able to have a catalyst for other development that improves the built environment and quality of life in the neighborhoods. And the city can use its influence to encourage public and private investments in these communities that have been bypassed by Houston's economic growth fueled by our city's big developer-driven agenda. We're leveraging those public-private partnerships and inviting developers to join in conversation with residents to bring more resources to these neighborhoods. And we're doing this because we have to address the inequities and disparities that shorten the lifespan of many Houstonians and lessen the quality of their lives in our city. Those include approximately 25% of all Harris County adults ages 19 to 64 can't afford to see a doctor, and more than 27% don't have health insurance. And while Houston's job market grew by 19% between 2008 and 2017, income inequality grew by 16% in the same period. The median incomes of neighborhoods within 10 miles of downtown are rising faster in Houston than in any other major Texas city. And as more affluent people move into the inner city, the population of low to moderate income residents decline. And from this slide, you'll see that we also have a major disparity in life expectancies. In the Cashmere Gardens area, people can be expected to live 20 years less, to have a 20-year shorter lifespan than people who are living in the Washington Avenue and Memorial Park area, which is less than 10 miles away. Next slide. Next slide. Every inequity that Houston needs to address exists in the complete communities. And for Houston to remain a city where people can start with nothing and make their way to a different place economically and socially, we can't have neighborhoods that have pockets of economic distress and disinvestment. And we can't assume that the market will take care of everything. People in the complete communities are just like each of us. They want to live near good schools, safe and fun parks, and businesses that cater to their needs and wants. The 10 complete communities were selected because they have not reached their full potential due to historical disinvestment, but have great strengths, opportunities, and partners who are working to improve these communities to ensure that existing residents can stay in their homes and keep them affordable as improvements are made. Next slide. One in 6 Houstonians live in the complete communities and work throughout the city. So when you transform the built environment and opportunity access in these neighborhoods, it makes all of Houston a more resilient and equitable city. Also, 10% of the city's land is within the complete communities. And you can see from this slide that the neighborhoods represent the diversity at-risk city, with 25% of Houston's Black population residing in a complete community, 19% of our Hispanic neighbors, and 19% of our Asian neighbors living in complete communities. And although it's only 4% of white Houstonians living in complete communities, the total number of that portion of our population is higher than the total number of Black residents in complete communities. So complete communities benefits all of us. It is an initiative that helps every racial and ethnic group in Houston. Next slide. Complete Communities Initiative brings together all of the diversity that's within our complete communities to build the action plans for the neighborhoods. And those action plans outline the vision, goals, benchmarks, projects, and programs identified through the community engagement process. And we use that community engagement process to get community stakeholders to define the fundamentals. What problems need solving, who can help to solve it, what will be done, and an estimated timeline for getting it all done. We then ask the stakeholders to spell out what success on each project means, and then we ask them what they are willing to contribute to achieve that success. But since residents often don't know the concrete steps that it takes to turn concepts into projects and deliverables, the Mayor's Office of Complete Communities takes on the challenging task of melding stakeholders' various expectations into a coherent and manageable set of goals with input from city departments and divisions and community-based implementing partners, such as the AIA and NOMA this evening. We also have leadership for this initiative with the Planning and Development Department and the Department of Neighborhoods. The Planning and Development Department maintains the ongoing civic engagement for this effort, and the Department of Neighborhoods addresses immediate concerns that can be handled through 311 and other means of getting resources quickly to people. Ultimately, though, the Complete Communities Initiative builds up the leadership in these neighborhoods through this ongoing community engagement and capacity building development. In 2018, the City of Houston hosted Complete Communities University to educate residents on how the city works, and we were organizing the 2020 edition before the pandemic required the suspension of all City of Houston permitted and sponsored events and public meetings. We did, however, use virtual platforms to complete the Complete Communities planning process, action plan process, and that the second set of 5 plans were endorsed by City Council in December 2020. The first set were endorsed in August of 2018. But once those action plans are endorsed by City Council, residents need to see the work happening. Changing the built environment of the complete communities encourages the sustainability of the initiative. When public works rebuild sidewalks and streets, when developers construct new affordable homes on vacant lots, when small business owners get loans to renovate abandoned commercial spaces, when old neighborhood libraries are upgraded to digital creative spaces, we collectively deliver on the promise of complete communities. And that's why out of the Mayor's Office of Complete Communities, we always stress that this is a citywide initiative that requires every city department and division to participate in some means. Because when residents can see the benefits of complete communities and its ability to improve their neighborhoods, they will not sit idly by and allow anyone to take it all away from them. They will continue to push forward on those action plans. So these design charrettes this evening are extremely important. Community-based design is not just about listening to residents. It's about working with and for residents to help them get what they deserve, even if they don't know how to ask for it. And like Mayor Turner, I grew up in one of the complete communities. He was raised in Acres Home and still lives in that community. And I was raised in Fort Bend, Houston, and I now live in the greater Third Ward area. So I am fortunate to get to claim a connection to two of the complete communities. You're going to hear from more complete communities residents in the video that will be played later near the end of the formal presentations. But I encourage you in this whole process, as you bring your great ideas to the complete communities, that you continue to remember that the client in all of this is the community, are the residents, are the business owners, are the people who are there on a daily basis. Mayor Turner is only our second African-American elected to lead this city, and he is transforming it daily by providing opportunities for all people of all race and ethnicities to make achievements that will go into the history books, for them to be the first to do whatever they are going to accomplish in this world. And they can do it from the complete communities. It doesn't mean you have to leave your neighborhood in order to achieve the highest heights, to achieve your ultimate dreams. You can do it right here. And so we thank you tonight for bringing your best ideas to making these neighborhoods places where people can soar. Thanks. And now you will hear from Susan Rogers, the University of Houston professor who has collaborated with the City of Houston on the Complete Communities Initiative from the very beginning, and help lead residents through this community action plan building process to get to their aspirations on paper and now to build them into reality. Susan?
Susan, you're still on mute.
Thank you, Janice. Thank you, Shannon. And could you go to the next slide, please? So I first wanted to thank the AIA, Houston NOMA, and Complete Communities for inviting me to join you today. I see so many familiar faces at the webinar, so I'm glad that you're here. As an educator, designer, and activist, my work departs from the disciplinary foundations of architecture and city planning with an expanded lens to directly engage questions of justice and equity. Next, please. So the Community Design Resource Center was established in 2005 and has a mission to apply design thinking to the broad spectrum of challenges that face our cities and communities. We depart from a place of optimism and curiosity, negotiating between the speculative and the pragmatic, and basing our ideas and proposals both in real conditions and possible futures. Next, please. Our work is equally centered on people and place. We believe that when you combine the power of people with the power of information and the power of place, we are prepared to take action that is both grounded and relevant. Next, please. This starts by truly knowing our city and our communities, because I think sometimes how we think about a place is not really how it is. And Houston is a city of both enormous possibility and real constraints. It's a hybrid mixture of corporate headquarters and petrochemical sprawl. Its economy is industrial and information-based. It is urban, suburban, and rural simultaneously. Next, please. It is also a city divided, as Shannon pointed out. You can draw a line through the center of Houston separating east from west. On the east is the industrial and working side of the city, landmarked by refineries, the ship channel, and hazardous air. In contrast, on the west, the landscape is defined by skyscrapers, wealth, and power. Next, please. There's another dividing line in Houston, though I think is also incredibly important. This one is less visible, but its impacts are real. This is the line that defines disparities in wealth and opportunities based on race or ethnicity. This is a line that needs to be erased. And we have to erase it together and through a lens of equity. Next, please. So since its founding, the CDRC has been committed to interrogating the inequities that shape both opportunity and place, collaboratively developing strategies with the potential to lead us to a more just city. We do this in 4 ways. First and foremost is by bringing people together, listening, a really key thing that we need to do more of as designers, collaborating and sharing in decision-making. Next, please. We meet people where they are and try to eliminate any barriers to participation. Next, please. And by making sure that no matter who sets the table, we want to make sure that the table is open to everyone and is a space where everyone has a voice and everyone is heard. Next, please. Second, the CDRC arms community leaders, members, and advocates with the data and mapping that they need for decision making. Next, please. Third, we work in partnership with leaders to understand and uncover the rich histories that have shaped our communities over time. Next, please. This allows us to both build forward into the future while honoring the past. Next one. And finally, we think of design as flexible and proactive, which means we focus on design as a process instead of a product, thinking of ourselves, the designers, if you will, as facilitators. So what does this look like? Next, please. We go where we are invited and we build on what is happening already, with a focus specifically on assets and strengths. Next, please. We work to rethink places with a singular use. And I'm sorry, there's a lag in the slides. In other words, trying to take the only out of our landscapes to develop new hybrid and synergistic models. Next, please. We consider the city, as Peter Cook noted, as a garden of ideas, and we look for opportunities everywhere, in hubs and corridors, in transit centers and utility easements, in public buildings and streets, in floodways, and in schools. Next, please. And through this, we work to imagine how they could become something more. In other words, how do we take the only out? More than just a place to catch the bus, with particular attention to meeting the most basic needs in our communities, whether that be for healthy food or for access to knowledge through book shares or mini libraries. It means exploring the ubiquitous parking lot as a space for intervention and invention. Next, please. And rethinking these sites as full of potential to spark both economic opportunity and change at a smaller scale. Next. For more than a decade, we've been exploring the possibilities embedded in the thousands of miles of easements that crisscross our city as a means both to provide connectivity for residents between parks and schools and community centers. The Houston Parks Board is now realizing many of these projects through their Beyond the Bayous program, including this proposal developed by students in the community design workshop years ago for Sharpstown. We are constantly exploring how we can make an impact without a lot of money, which we think will be increasingly important as we move forward. Next, please. In other words, learning to do more with less so we can do it more often and in more places. Next, please. We believe as designers, we also have to understand where our public dollars are being invested and whether these investments are in line with both our values and our priorities. And if they are not, how can we align them by advocating for reprioritizing particularly public dollars in healthcare, schools, parks, or libraries. I think finally, as an educator, an activist, and a designer, I'm always looking for new ways to support the next generation of designers who are committed to equity and justice. Next, please. This means founding my pedagogy on engagement with real places, real issues, and most importantly, real people and their aspirations and their visions. Next, please. Such as the Animating History Project, which was a collaboration between art and architecture students at the University of Houston and completed in partnership with the EEDC and other third ward stakeholders to tell the stories of places that had been erased in the community. Next, please. And I wanted to just say for those we have lost, Charles is no longer with us. He was a long-term caretaker of the Ennis Washateria at the intersection of Elgin and Ennis. Next, please. A more recent project I took on with my studio was to explore a food hub in Sunnyside. Next, please. The project was a partnership with the visionary Ivy Walls, the creative engine behind Ivy Leaf Farms. If you don't know who they are, please look them up. She also is behind the Black Farmer Box and many other ventures. Her energy kept the students engaged and passionate across a very difficult semester. I want to conclude by underscoring our belief at the CDRC in the necessity of taking the time to build really strong relationships that are centered on honesty, trust, integrity, and transparency. This is the foundation of all that we do. And without our partners like Tanya DeBose and Independence Heights and hundreds of others, our work would be meaningless. Next slide, please. I think furthermore, I want to say that these relationships that we've built over decades of work have ensured that the work that we do resonates. Next, please. And by that, I mean resonate not just with the leaders who are our direct partners, but with the larger community. And with that, I am going to pass it off to Janice Brackett with Kirksey, who's going to be presenting an architectural case study in the Sunnyside neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Our team at Sunnyside has learned a lot from all of the work that Susan and her teams have done over the years. So we very much appreciate the resources that she brings to the table and the vast knowledge. So I am honored to be part of the team working on a funded project within one of the complete communities, Sunnyside in Council District D. We've been working with the General Services Department and Houston Health Department, in addition to the Sunnyside community at large. I'm going to run through these slides quickly, but would be happy to answer questions about the process if there's time at the end, or there'll be an email address at the end if you have follow-up questions. So Kirksey was hired to design the new multi-service center and health center. Working with the mayor's office and council, we hosted a number of workshops to learn more about Sunnyside. Over the last few years, we've held the meetings both in person and now virtually. Through these visioning sessions, we've conducted exercises with representatives from the current facilities, the ambassadors from the neighborhood and community at large. The ambassadors were selected by the council and by the mayor's office. It's important as you go through these things to scale these exercises based on the number of stakeholders. So we have different exercises that really are focused on really large groups and some that are focused on smaller groups. So really think about that as you get into these workshops. These exercises are critical in getting to know the people, their history, and to hear their stories, and in this case, their priorities. And then the next step that we look at is really in orientation to the site. So it's really important for you and for them. So when you're looking at the site, it's important for you to understand what the site conditions are, what's going on in the site, what the surrounding neighborhood is, But it's also important to share that with the community that you're dealing with, because a lot of times in the case of Sunnyside, there were some questions as to where this facility was going to be located. And so making sure that everybody is at the same page, starting from the same level of information. And then it's also important to explain the benefits of the project to the community, helping them understand. In this case, we had a health center and a multi-service center. And what the city is doing with this is they're blending it into one facility and bringing that all under one roof to provide those services for healthcare, for social services, and for seniors. And then throughout this process, we've had different touch points, made lots of different presentations to the community to communicate the vision, how we've responded to their needs, reiterating the messages that they've shared with us along the way, and helping them to understand the overall process and timeline of how design works. And thank you, Jennifer, you're doing a great job. I can't tell you how hard it is for somebody to try to do this remotely. So we always appreciate AIA and especially Jennifer for helping us through all of this. So again, it's really important to summarize the process of design and show how the input from the community is incorporated and how that then translates into a physical design. So this is showing a little bit about the site concept and how we've developed that. And then really, again, looking at some of the images that resonated with the community and talking about a big canopy porch element. And then how does that translate into the actual architecture? And if you can keep going forward, so again, kind of reiterating some of the ideas that we've talked about, I will pause on this next one and point out a lot of the input that we got from the community was through this process. And so there's a lower canopy. You know, we talked about a big porch. That's a big part of the concept, but then there's a lower canopy that Mr. Tracy, who's one of the ambassadors from the neighborhood, it was really important to him. He wanted to make sure that we understood that if somebody's dropping somebody off. So there are elements within the design that you can go back to, that you can take back to the community and show them how it's influenced, how their input has influenced the design. And then as Jennifer goes through these next set of diagrams, I'll also just touch on some of our limitations. So it is a project that's funded by the city, and the General Services Department and the Houston Health Department has a program. They have the funding. They have the specific goals that they're trying to achieve. But all of this, we're trying to overlay what the community is asking for and what they're looking for. We recognize that we're not trying to solve all of the community's issues within this one facility, but that this one facility is with part of the whole community and will integrate with the fabric of the neighborhood. Again, getting their feedback from the community, bringing that to the table, helping them understand what value they bring to the process. And then we as design professionals need to recognize that we can't do everything, but we can help bring this community's voice into this project. And if you could pause there for a moment, please. So we can bring this community's voice into this project. We also communicate to the communities we engage with that we can't answer all of their questions nor provide solutions for all of their challenges, but we can make an impact. And I am encouraged by the overwhelming response to this series of workshops and really excited to see what's going to happen with all of these conversations that we're having virtually. And I would like to just reiterate that in the end, it is their vision and not our vision, but really their vision. And it's our job as design professionals to help illustrate that vision and help bring that out. So now I will turn it over to Megan Venable-Thomas, and Megan will share more on participatory design and best practices.
Thank you, Janice. And thank y'all for having me. I'm so excited to be here today. My name is Megan Venable-Thomas. I work for Enterprise Community Partners, which is a national nonprofit that does affordable housing and community development. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit about participatory design. One, I'm as a doctor in public health in the community development practice, I'm particularly interested in the intersection of health equity and design. And when we think about equitable approaches to design, it really comes in with this participatory design and how we think about shifting power, how we think about shifting practice, and as Shannon mentioned at the very beginning, to who our clients are and our most valuable stakeholders, whom are residents. So participatory design is an approach to design that invites all stakeholders in the design process, and in particular, when we think about participatory design as an equitable development approach, it's an opportunity to prioritize and invest in resident leadership and community residents' expertise as key stakeholders and clients in the design and development process, really shifting the power as we've seen in these fields. Next slide, please. So why do we do it? We do this because it can have many positive impacts. One, it can improve the design. Participation will bring a better understanding of the needs and barriers and desired opportunities of the residents and surrounding communities. By having a deeper understanding for the functions and program of the building, the design can more accurately reflect the necessities of use and experience. Two, it can increase impact. The community-driven process bypasses assumptions and ensures that you're designing based on lived experiences and the actual needs of the end user. By incorporating lessons learned from previous projects and the priorities of the community, the resulting development or project can perform at a higher level, really elevating the quality of living. And three, fostering community support. If you remember back to the last slide, fostering community support, community engagement increases opportunities for involvement and community building. A shared sense of ownership of the project can result in people taking greater pride and care in the development. And the engagement process really during the design development allows for stakeholders to voice concerns and or support for the project prior to being placed into service, enabling any changes to occur before construction when alterations are much more difficult. The participatory design process becomes reflective of the larger community and a source of shared accomplishments. And so the typical design process that we're shifting from, right, it tends to be linear, with intermittent presentations, check-ins with the contracted client. And although there are iterations within each milestone of the design process, the development of the project is driven by the architect rather than the client, the community. And so if we shift towards a participatory design process, it's much more community-driven. The client is the community. Next slide, please. So community engagement really helps to redefine the client to extend beyond the person who contracts the project, but to include residents, maintenance staff, service providers, and more, small business owners. The participatory process holds community input and approval at the center, with all design phases moving from the community. And this ensures the appropriate design, effective building functions, and really community buy-in. Next slide, please. And so one practice to incorporate during participatory design is asset mapping. Participatory asset mapping can really build on existing community strengths. It recognizes human capital and the capacity of individuals to use their hearts, their heads, and their hands to build and create positive structures in their communities. And as a community-based participatory research process used in public health and design, it promotes community leadership in research, decision-making, and action, and transforms institutional preconceptions of what assets look like and feel like, preconceptions that often perpetuate inequities. And so when we think about assets, it really helps us to reform and reshape what those are and how we understand them by using community input. And so asset mapping can help communities and designers to build on and expand existing community strengths, to facilitate community involvement, to generate a shared awareness and understanding of community assets, to articulate and communicate spatial knowledge to external agencies, to manage resources, community development and planning, and really identify and potentially increase the capacity within communities to be able to participate in this way. Next slide, please. So assets maps created through a community-based process can really identify and illustrate the existing or potential connections between groups, organizations, and institutions by engaging community residents in a process of identifying existing or missing community assets. And organizations can paint a clear picture of the overall status of the community and organize around the cause of strengthening community resources. And so much of community work has happened already around these action plans, that have lifted up a vision for what change is desired in community at large. And now we're interested in translating these visions into actual design and infrastructure decisions. And we want to ensure these designs and infrastructure decisions are informed by the ideas and voices and connected to all of the existing community assets and networks. So community assets can be easy to identify, locate, and map. Next slide, please. Especially when community residents are the sources of the information. So for example, you can plan and hold a participatory asset event that brings together a group of community residents to identify and discuss the assets in their community. And the discussions may begin with community members defining the term asset or confirming and enhancing a proposed definition. Using their definition and through facilitated dialogue, they can identify the places that fit this definition on a map. In the process, finding out about assets they may not have been familiar with, or that their neighbors have similar perspectives about. And so participatory asset mapping can also lead to discussions and maps that not only reflect community assets, but also barriers to accessing them. This can really reveal how organizations can use their research method or this research method to identify places that can become assets through targeted improvement and design decisions. And so this is one way that you can better understand what's happening in community and how community residents can begin to kind of see and build collective power through their understanding of the existing community assets. Next slide, please. We will go deeper into this in our training later in the month, but ultimately our number one goal is to uplift our primary client, and that is people and residents. And so I'll be followed by Krista Stoneham, the division manager for Complete Communities, to continue to take us on this road. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. And good evening, everyone. My name is Krista Stoneham, and I'm the division manager of the Mayor's Office of Complete Communities. Before joining the Mayor's Office, I served 5 years in the Planning and Development Department as a senior planner. And while in this role, I led the Acres Home Complete Community. Therefore, I've been very grateful to have seen this initiative launch and grow to where we are this evening. I first would like to thank AIA Houston, my fellow board members at NOMA, and our speakers for explaining their role and expertise in community-led design, because the heart of the Complete Communities Initiative is the community. The Designing for Impact series was put together to bring the design community, partners from various sectors, and the residents to envision the future of their community. But before I explain a little more about our collaborative approach, I want to share what the residents have shared with us. Because who should determine a community's future other than the community's residents? Ultimately, the community is our client, and I'm honored to introduce them to you all with a short video.
When I campaigned for mayor of this great city, and it is a great city, I vowed that we cannot allow Houston to be two cities in one, a city of haves and have-nots.
We want to continue the betterment of this neighborhood for our children.
It's about building these neighborhoods up.
I think of a community that's fully equipped, a group of individuals, stakeholders, family, educators, business people coming together to not only fellowship for the same goals or similar goals and interests, but to provide quality, accessibility, amenities for our children, for our families, and the future.
I believe a complete community is one that has all of the necessary or complete parts to it. I believe it's an established plan that realistically accomplishes a set of goals that are aimed at the basic needs of every resident in that community. The completion of goals fulfilled that will provide access to quality services and resources that were unavailable prior to completion. Example, our community lacks the basics of food and healthcare, jobs and social services, communication, transportation, schools, infrastructure, etc. It is in essence a community that improves the quality of life for all of the residents and neighbors.
Jennifer and Justin, we're residents of near Northside, have lived here for about 4 years. And what we love about living here is its diversity, its proximity to everything Houston has to offer, the feeling of a neighborhood, that we are small enough to know our neighbors and watch kids walk to school every day. And what we're excited about for Complete Communities is that we believe that all neighborhoods in the city of Houston deserve access to equitable infrastructure. And sadly, near Northside doesn't always have that. And so we're excited for the city to bring that to us because all people deserve that in the city of Houston.
The working action plan is so important for me because it outlines all of the areas that the community needs and wants to see improve. So it's pretty much like a blueprint of the community solution. It gives you, actionable items to plan against and to actually, even some of the items you can either collect metrics against just to see like if the area is improving. But yeah, it's a guide to what the area needs to do so that way everybody just doesn't have these silo movements or things going on and happening.
What I love about the community and what's happened post-Harvey, people are more engaged. Quite a few people did not know they had a voice. And what Complete Communities has done, it's brought out those voices.
People helping people, neighbors helping their neighbors is the way that we're going to clean up this community and the way we're going to have the best community in the world. I want my ditch to be dredged out. I want it to be cemented. I want it to look like all the rest of the ditches in the other neighborhoods.
Job training is the first thing at the top of the list. And we put this Post-it note here because we think this is an extremely important area. It's one of the highest priorities, and that we think it should be a joint topic with the education work group, because clearly for people to be able to access better jobs and make more money to improve their lives and help their families, they need to have the education to find those jobs.
Everyone in the city has an affordable place to live in a community where they can thrive. And that means infrastructure, that means schools, that means all of the amenities that the city is committing to bringing to these complete communities.
That's what this program is all about, that the best for our city has yet to come. Thank you all so very, very much.
I hope you enjoyed the video because the residents said it best. They're here to work with the city, business community, partners, and residents to revitalize and enhance their communities. However, there's a need for a vibrant and local hub to house community activities and transformational programming. Our solution to empowering families is to create anchor hubs and corridors in the complete communities. An anchor hub and corridor is a place-based strategy to build strong families, eradicate multi-generational poverty, and create environments of opportunity. Through transformational programming and partnerships, the anchor hubs and corridors seek to empower the whole family to thrive through education, workforce development and career pathways, health and human services, in addition to arts, culture, and civic engagement. On the next slide are some examples of some of the complete communities, hubs, and corridors in the neighborhoods. Acres Home will soon house the Bethune Empowerment Center in the heart of the community, a former middle school that will be revitalized into an economic and community resource on South Victory Drive. Sunnyside will be home to the largest urban solar farm in the country. Third Ward is on the verge of opening the Emancipation Center, an affordable housing operations center on Emancipation Avenue. Alief Westwood broke ground on the Alief Neighborhood Center, the first City of Houston facility that will house services and programs from Houston Public Library, Parks and Recreation Department, and the Health Department. TXRX in the second ward is leading innovation in the community with the East End Maker Hub. So in summary, these communities may have significant disparities in social, educational, and economic outcomes, but these communities are communities of opportunity, resilience, and strength. They have invested leaders and stakeholders willing to do the work. So we invite you, the design community, community stakeholders, and residents to join us in our collaborative approach to design impact in the complete communities. Designers are encouraged to sign up as teams or individuals for the Community Design Workshop, which will take place on Saturday, February 20th. And it's not too late to sign up. The deadline is this Friday. At the workshop, the teams will engage directly with the residents to develop visions identified from the respective community's action plan. We will also provide an opportunity for the design teams to meet with the Complete Communities team on February 16th. But in the meantime, I once again welcome you to sign up as a design team and to join us in designing solutions with the community. Because designing for impact at the resident level helps our city become a community that is more equitable and prosperous for all Houstonians. Thank you all for your time. We will now address any questions that have not been addressed in the chat. And if there's any questions for any of the panelists or any of the speakers, feel free to drop them in the Q&A.
So Krista, we have a question about asking more about the February 8th and February 16th meetings.
So on the 8th is our target deadline to send out some of the background material. We would send out the problem statements defined for the different complete communities areas. We'll send out the action plan, some of the data. We also have a mapping tool that's been created to help visually show some of the analysis. The meeting on the 16th is voluntary for the design teams if they wanted to interact directly with the complete communities lead planners, just to get more context or address any questions they may have before the workshop on the 20th.
We also have had a few questions about the slides, and I know the recording will be available, but are we also posting the slides on the AI website as well? Or we'll follow up with attendees on that.
Yes, we will follow up with a way to disperse the slides. We'll have to condense the file, but we will come up with a way to disperse those.
There is a question about the workshop on the 20th and that all of our workshops and all of our meetings will be virtual.
There was also a question, could you register as an individual, or could you register if you were not necessarily a design professional? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
Yes. And students are also welcome.
Yes, I think it's very helpful to have lots of voices at the table on both the design side and on the community side. So the more the merrier, absolutely. And we've had a few requests to have the presentation sent directly to people. And we just ask that you check on the AI YouTube site for the presentation. And again, we'll follow up on how to distribute the slides in a condensed manner. But we will not be able to email. We will not be able to email all of the slides to every attendee.
Sorry, there was also a question earlier of when the construction would start on these projects.
About the examples that I provided, I'm assuming. I don't have a detailed timeline in front of me in terms of each project. For example, the Bethune Empowerment Center is an existing building that will be revitalized, but It's actually on City Council agenda tomorrow. So that technically kicks off the approval process in terms of design and such. So that one is a little bit in the schematic phase, but it's in design development. The Sunnyside Solar Farm was approved by City Council maybe a couple weeks ago. So that project is about 2 years in the making. So there's different timelines, but all of the projects that are a part of the workshop, we will provide more of that background information in terms of the actual vision for the facility and what's the timeline for it.
Thanks, Crystal, for giving that broad overview. I did want to say, though, Mayor Turner is determined to see all of the major anchor projects for the complete communities completed in the next 2 to 3 years. So he's brought on some consultants to bring in project management assistance in order to move things forward. Bethune, we're hoping will get started no later than Q2, the second quarter of this year, so that we can have the construction moving forward. But it's a lot of moving pieces, and the feasibility phase for the nation's largest solar farm is challenging in working through all of those details. But Krista is a fantastic division manager and doing a lot of the community outreach and working with our Office of Sustainability in order to help with that project. We also have our Chief Resilience Officer, Marissa Aho, who has also been moving things forward with that project. There's support from the Chief of Staff, the Deputy Chiefs of Staff. Everybody is moving these projects forward because we do feel that the complete communities anchor projects must get done in a very short timeline.
Susan, there was a question that I think, well, Susan, Megan, or Janice could answer. As a student, how can I begin to incorporate participatory design into my work?
I thought that was a great question. And I love to hear questions from students. I think participatory design, it really needs to be built into the pedagogy of the course. So you can continue to advocate for that, being embedded in your studio work or in the work you're doing. I think it enriches a project so much to work directly in partnership with community members to develop a vision that they had. As I mentioned, we worked with Ivy Walls of Ivy Leaf Farms in the fall to develop a food hub project in Sunnyside. And the students were incredibly engaged and passionate about the projects that they produced, and they were incredible. So advocate.
I would just also add that as a student, you have power too. So if that is not in your curriculum, if your instructors are not teaching that, now you know. You have no excuse because you listened to this presentation. So you can say, right, you can add that information to any projects that you're participating in. If you are a person on a design team, a professional, a practitioner in a community or working for a community that is not yours, you should always be doing, and even if it is yours, you want as many voices to be able to participate in a process. That's how you have diversity and creativity in your outcomes and your design, is more voices are at the table, and particularly those who have expertise in living in those communities and have that longevity of knowledge that you want to be able to lift up. And so in all of your, I would encourage you in all of your processes to be thinking about, how is engagement part of that process? And if it's not included, how can I be adding it?
There's a question of, how will communities be paired with teams? Will teams be working with the same communities and be working with the same community leaders? So on the registration link, you are allowed to select your community of choice. However, we can't make any guarantees that that will be the community you're paired with, but you will be prepared with one. And those communities will also have stakeholders, community residents, as well as the community planner for those communities at the workshop. So you will be able to meet and mingle with all of those people. We will facilitate that meeting for you. It will happen on the 20th at the community workshop. So virtually, you will be able to meet everyone involved in that community. And we are sending out a request to our complete community residents to participate and to come to the table with their ideas. They are very excited to have this opportunity to work with design professionals and to be heard in the design process.
I see we also have a comment from Councilmember David Robinson, who's also an architect, hoping that some of our elected officials can attend and perhaps even participate. So certainly, in addition to the community members, it would be great to have some of our stakeholders in leadership.
There's also a comment, I'm a student at U of H and really enjoyed the presentations. However, I'm in San Antonio. Are there any organizations that you know of that are doing the same kind of things here? I would suggest connecting with the AIA organization or architecture organizations there and checking with them. But I will also want to reiterate that this is a virtual process, so anyone can participate in the community workshops that we have coming up because they will be done virtually and you won't be limited by location.
Lindsay, I thought there were some great questions by community members also of whether all the projects had been determined or if they can bring projects to the table and how will community leaders be engaged in this process?
Krista, I think would probably be better suited to answer the scope of those.
Yeah, no problem. So absolutely, we encourage residents to bring their ideas. This is not an opportunity to say, this is what we're going to do and this is what we're going to bring. We want the residents to bring their creativity, bring their ideas for the design teams to help interpret. Now, in terms of the anchor hubs and corridors, the intent is to say that, we'll have this facility in order to co-locate different services and such, but it's not going to function on its own. It needs to be a part of the ecosystem of the community, which is why we need the community residents to help tell the stories of what other assets or what other opportunities are aligned with these various hubs and corridors that I explained. So I believe I also saw a question that was a little bit similar in terms of what's the difference between this and the project that's happening in Fort Bend, Houston. And I would say the answer is the same. Even though that particular site has been developed and they're moving forward on it, once again, how do we integrate and align the opportunities and such of the Edison Arts facility with the Fort Bend, Houston community? It needs the support of the overall ecosystem of that community. So this is an opportunity to ultimately connect the dots, right? Is there something that's missing? Is there something that needs to be elevated? This is the opportunity to have that space.
I'm just going to add, I think Krista gave the full macro view of all of it, and I applaud it. I just want to have a very specific ask related to it. When we are talking about these anchor projects, one of the things that Mayor Turner said to the development community, to private investors, real estate developers, that he would not ask them to go alone into parts of our city where they had not invested before. He wants to layer as much investment as possible into these complete communities to bring about rapid economic development, again, while still keeping the neighborhoods affordable, also building affordable housing. There's a lot to get done at one time. But what we're doing with these design charrettes will help residents to visually see what they're trying to accomplish with these corridors, right? And then it gives the complete communities action plans additional heft. Susan worked on those plans. They're detailed. They are, they identify who they think should get some stuff done for them, right? But for the developers to be able to look at something that's been drawn out to say, this is what this corridor could look like. This is where you could put your grocery store. This is where you could put your pharmacy. This is where you could put your health clinic. All of these things will help us to drive the momentum to deliver on the aspirations that the residents have, right? And so that's what's so truly transformational about the work that you all will be doing as design teams. And I think the answer back was that you didn't have to all be design professionals to do it. Urban planners can have their whole team. Engineers can have their team. I am a former journalist. I could have a team. I wouldn't have pretty drawings, but I could recruit somebody to work with me, right? just bring your ideas, because that is what's going to help the residents to take what they put in words and put pictures behind them that can energize and excite people to bring more to the table and more to the conversation.
There was a question of, will these resources be available, such as a web page, link, etc., to follow the progress of the projects? We will have these available. I would first check AIA and NOMA websites. I know once we get the designs of these done, we would like to do some sort of virtual showing of the results. And we also will have a presentation back to the community on March 6th. So anyone who participated in the workshops, and even if you didn't, if you want to just come for the presentation back to the community of these designs, you're more than welcome to do that as well. Will the packets have asset mapping in them? Megan?
We will be going over asset mapping at the training. So if you apply and are interested in being a design team, you will get some materials and package and training about asset mapping that will happen on the 16th.
Megan, another one for you is, how will the community workshops be structured? Will they participate in breakout rooms, and how will they be able to do this virtually? Because shredding is a new experience online.
Yes, so it is a new experience for all of us online, as is the whole year of doing things virtually. And so, yeah, we will be using a lot of different creative ways for us to interact and engage with each other. Breakout rooms, we'll be using different types of applications online to do sticky noting and really be able to find creative ways to get our ideas out there and to engage with one another. So we will send out what the agenda will be for the workshops once we have the design team selected.
I think this would be more for Shannon. Most major thoroughfare corridors are already developed. So what are some of the plans to redevelop them or to fund new development on them?
So that's the visioning that the residents did with the action plans, right? And Susan can also speak to this part of it. There are major thoroughfares that had been developed, right? And then we saw business decline and areas that didn't recover from the 1980s downturn, the 1990s downturn. Now we're in the 2020 downturn. So there are all kinds of pockets of development and redevelopment that needs to happen. The residents, though, identified where they thought were the most significant corridors that they wanted to see that development congregate. So it's not the city dictating through the planning department or our capital improvement plans how we want those neighborhoods to grow and develop. We're using what the residents said back to us. And so for Third Ward in particular, they said Emancipation Avenue was what they wanted to have revitalized in lots of different ways. And there's been a Main Street designation that the Emancipation Economic Development Corporation did. There's a lot of work with community groups who have been at the forefront. The Super Neighborhood in Third Ward adopted these action plans as a guiding light for the work that they are doing collectively. And they report back on their working groups and how they are working on those sections. And they have become strong advocates for what they want to see done. When they don't like a type of development that's coming from Emancipation Avenue, they talk about it and they come to city council and they push and they work hard to get the kind of development that they think is necessary. Janice talked about Sunnyside, and where there was an initial proposal for where to put the multi-service center that the residents said no to, and said no to it loudly. And so there is a lot of space within the complete communities for the work that the residents want to see happen. And we are using their direction as the way that we move forward. Our Public Works Department, though, has done assessments of sidewalks and roadways to see what infrastructure has to be improved. right? And making sure that they are prioritizing that work in complete communities to move that forward. We're also looking at all of the parks. There has been a capital needs assessment done on all of our neighborhood parks, and those are parks of 1 acre to 14 acres, and identifying what needs to be there. And then the mayor has launched the 50-50 Parks Partner Program for that. If those parks are along those major corridors, then that is also another way of tying all of this back in. Sometimes, a lot of times they're not, but Emancipation Avenue actually does have a major park, and that's a signature park now in our city. That wasn't done totally because of the complete communities, but it has all been elevated, the whole effort in the complete communities. So it really comes down to listening to the residents, and then at this stage, once those action plans have been endorsed by City Council, moving forward with the implementation strategies. And a lot of times that's going to require a lot more people coming in and providing pro bono consulting services, or developers who want to be engaged with residents and do this participatory led design in order to make sure that we have the right mix of development that is respectful of what the residents have asked for and delivers on the promises that are made to them, that they will be able to have what they deserve in their neighborhoods.
Thank you. I'm going to leave this one open to anyone on the steering committee that wants to kind of explain it. They're just asking for a little more insight into the February 20th event and the March 6th event. Like, what are the deliverables? How is this going to be structured? And what is the process from here?
I would say some of them is about the strategy, the design strategy of how do we, like I said, connect the dots. Some of them is a little bit more preliminary in terms of needing a schematic solution. Some of them, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the different examples that were written for the design problems. But in terms of specific deliverables, renderings representing the design solutions, different cross sections, if applicable. Some of them are more focused on the actual corridor in lieu of the actual site. So it'll be a variety of deliverables. There'll be a little bit of variety. A little bit of programming.
There was a question if Janice could speak a little more to managing expectations. Can you give an example?
Sure, yes. So it is important as you go through these processes and work with communities that you are managing expectations, because you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, right? That's something as design professionals in particular we don't want to do. It's something as humans we don't want to do. You do have to resist the urgency to say, oh yeah, let me see if I can figure out how to make that work. An example of working through the Sunnyside project, the Health Center Multi-Service Center project, is we talked with the community and they were asking questions about the bus route and how do we increase the bus route? How do we change it so that it stops right in front of the Sunnyside Center? And so, there are things that we, through our design professionals' responsibility, as well as our connections, we don't have control over. We can help connect them, help connect the different aspects within the city and within Metro to talk to each other, but we certainly don't have any control over that. So that's an example of something that we did that, we said, we'll see what we can do, but we certainly cannot promise. There's certainly, in terms of the project that was funded, there were all kinds of great ideas that we talked about with the community, with the ambassadors, lots of thoughts and ideas that were beyond the scope of what we had funding for. And so we really have to make sure that we're clear with the stakeholders what it is that we can do and what we can't do, and know what those limitations are. That's a great question. I hope that helped.
What are the duration of each workshop?
We're planning for about an hour and a half for each of our workshops. Some might have breaks and be coinciding. So really, we're just still thinking about exactly what the structure will be based on the needs of the design teams. And so I know I keep saying that, but I think a lot will depend on who the designers are that we get the training that is necessary to bring everybody on the same page and connect them with planners and folks in community, and then ultimately to be able to be in a space to create together and what kind of capacity you need to be able to produce.
I would love to answer this question. Eric Burnside just sent a question asking that design school industry puts a lot of value in novelty, originality, and something no one else has seen before. Sometimes community impact projects need shady spaces, safe spaces, and very basic amenities. Would any panelists like to speak further on reframing the design process and what constitutes a successful outcome? I think Megan definitely presented some really good ideas around that, but I think we also have to, like, for me, one of the key goals is to understand that a single project has ripple effects in the community at large, and understanding that I think we have to move beyond the kind of project idea that this is a project and it's a one-off, and really towards how are we kind of building processes. And I think when you engaging people and listening to what they have to say is the first step. And Megan, maybe you could add to this, but I think as architects and designers, I personally believe anyway, that we should always look outside of our site, always, and try to identify the other synergies and the other things that that project could do beyond the limits of a single project.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think when we talk about centering people, right, and particularly our clients who are community, then our outcomes look different, right? And that's why when we have a different intention, it requires different outcomes, and it shifts, again, the power and the process. Because if I'm just designing to win a competition, right, if I'm designing for something else, then I might be, my ultimate outcome might be how pretty it looks, or how engaging, or how, you know, critically reflective it creates, you know, people's, you know, drives their minds to be critically reflective. But when we're talking about centering on the people and how they experience these places in their daily lives, how it impacts their health and their ability to thrive, then we need safety, right, as a basic outcome. We need these amenities that you're talking about, Eric. And so I think that's really what we're trying to do when we say shifting this process, that these outcomes have to shift as well.
But I also think, you know, for the complete communities, it's important for the aesthetics to be there, right? It can't just be pretty. It's exactly what Megan and Susan said, right? It has to be focused. But many people who live in the complete communities will never have had an opportunity to work with an architect to think through a design problem. I remember reading something when I was trying to educate myself on all of this about, you know, designing for the other 98%, that it's only like 2% of the population that on the regular gets to work with architects to build their living and workspaces. And I think that is part of the strength of all of this, and that this is an old concept of these community design centers that are working to uplift and elevate the living environments for people who are with low incomes but high aspirations, right? And so I think if you do the work of it being comprehensive and participatory and very strategic, and how you plan it out for how people really use the spaces and how they really do need to connect the dots on these corridors, and using these hubs as safe spaces in times of stress and shock, right? You know, those lily pads and other safe spaces and green infrastructure and all of those things that are the buzzwords that are in your industry, but are real live safety nets for people in communities that are economically distressed. And I think you get to the design that works well and still provides beauty. We are trying to change the built environment of these neighborhoods to reflect the beauty of the people living there. And so when you bring your talents to the physical spaces to make them just as beautiful as those people, then it's a win for everybody.
Again, the resources, we're getting several questions about would the resources be made available. We'll try to make this presentation available. We just have to compress some of it. But the design teams, once you sign up by this Friday, you will get a packet with resources, not just the things that were shown here tonight, but you will also get the action plan for the community you're selected for, the data snapshot and the data book, any maps that we have that would be helpful. There will also be a GIS mapping tool that we've built out to help you in studying these areas. So you'll have time in between now and meeting your community planner to kind of look over your sites and get familiar with the area statistically, but also we hope that you can somehow explore it, even if it's just Google Earth. Then on the 20th, we will definitely have resident stakeholders there. You will meet your community planner and other teams, members of your team, to talk to you about the community, to give you real life insight into the designs and what they would like to see. So just want to reiterate, once you sign up, we promise we're not going to leave you hanging. We only have a little while left. I just want to open it to any of our panelists if there's any final thoughts that you would like to share.
Yes, I would. I have a final word for my licensed architects out there. I'll speak to you for a second. You know, when you pass those exams, when you receive that paper in the mail from the state, you know, you are now licensed to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public, right? And so this program offers you, you know, the easiest entry point into doing that. Whether your firm practices in this manner, whether you're just becoming interested in community design, this is the easiest and you know, quickest entry point for you to engage in that manner. Because I've met several architects, you know, that, you know, we work on tons of a variety of different projects. So you could just be doing something that's not even related, but you're wondering, how can you make an impact in making communities more equitable? This is a perfect opportunity for you to do that. And I know you're doing it because you're here. So then the charge is to bring somebody with you to kind of put that team together. You don't have to wait for somebody to ask you to do it. Go ahead and take that charge. And if you need help with that, reach out. We have plenty of folks.
Okay, we're a minute over. I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you for all your participation. Again, please sign up and visit us on our website to register. You can go to aihouston.org and find the Designing for Impact landing page and register to become a design team. The community workshops will take place on the 20th. We need residents and stakeholders to also register for those community workshops. So please pass them to your neighbors, your friends, anyone you think would be interested or would benefit from this community-led design process. And we will be back March 6th to present all of the great work and ideas generated to the community. Thank you all for joining us. Again, thank you to AIA Houston and my fellow board members for hosting this on our platform. Thank you to my fellow NOMA board members for joining us as well. Thank you to Shannon, Megan, Janice, Susan, Catherine, Justin, and Krista for presenting for us tonight. And thank you, Jennifer, for running back of house, which I know in this virtual world is always fun. We hope that you are inspired tonight to kind of reframe your mind and thinking about designing with communities and rather designing for communities. Thanks.